If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. Moving beyond questions of God's existence, this podcast asks what atheists should be doing next in a godless world. Hello everyone, this is Nathan here with my co-host Todd Tavares.
Hello.
We're excited today to have Andrew Grossen on the podcast. Andrew is the communication manager at the Secular Coalition for America. Originally from Minnesota, Andrew earned 2 degrees from University College Dublin in Ireland, including a master's in American politics and foreign policy. While in Ireland, Andrew was active in the historic referendum campaign supporting the legalization of same-sex marriage in 2015, abortion in 2018, and blasphemy also in 2018. And so today we're going to talk about his work in Ireland and then also his work with the Secular Coalition for America. Andrew, welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, Andrew. So you were in Ireland. How long were you in Ireland?
So I moved there in 2014 and I left in 2019.
Oh.
But I had previously spent 1 year actually in high school. I did my junior year of high school in rural Ireland. And then I loved it so much. When I finished up high school in Minnesota, I knew I wanted to go back there.
Where are you now?
I'm in Washington, D.C., working for Secular Coalition for America, which is based here.
Awesome. How long? So, and you've been back there for 1 year? That must have been. I mean, if you were there were you there during the Capitol riots in January?
Oh yeah. So my girlfriend and I live about a half mile away from the Capitol building. So it was pretty surreal to know that was going on just down the street from us. We heard the helicopters going. It was not fun to be that close to the insurrection.
Yeah, and there's always stuff going on in DC. But was there a big police presence before then, or that day, or because Trump was having rallies around town, wasn't he?
Yeah, and there's some police presence, but it wasn't until afterwards where the National Guard erected big fences and barbed wire.
That's right.
Which is pretty unfortunate for a lot of residents of DC because this is our home. Like, it's very casual to go on the National Mall and have picnics, especially in pandemic times. This is how we see our friends.
Right. Is all the barricades and things like those are still all up?
A few of them are coming down, but still pretty high barbed wire fences around the main buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. That's and the ones they have now, they're like those military walls almost. I had been down there at the start of Trump's campaign, so it would have been like the Million Woman March, I suppose, right after his inauguration. And I mean, everything was fenced up then. Was there a big police presence during the BLM stuff, the Black Lives Matter stuff in the last summer?
Oh yes. When we were protesting last year, I went down in support of that. The police had riot gear and you couldn't tell what police force they were with, what law enforcement agency they were with. And actually, my girlfriend and I, we were near the protest and we were there earlier in the day. The infamous one in Lafayette Square Park when
Mm-hmm.
Trump unleashed a rain of tear gas and rubber bullets, all for a photo op by a church.
Yeah,
Right,
yes.
right,
It was
right.
very important for him to hold that Bible.
Yeah, the picturesque of white Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Mm, hmm.
Wait, so
Yeah.
has this moved back? Was this a big change from Ireland?
Yes, and I had initially thought I wanted to work in more electoral politics. I spent some time different internships, and then last year I worked for Working America. It's a labor organization, and then due to COVID, my job got cut. So, and I was kind of searching around. I did not expect to land in the Secular Coalition for America. I've been an atheist for a long time since high school, but I did not know how organized everything was, the different organizations. And I've really had a really cool learning experience since coming on last July.
Mm. Well, maybe we can go back in time and talk. So you said you've been an atheist since high school, but maybe you can talk about your religious background.
Yeah, I grew up kind of a half Catholic, half Lutheran, thanks to my mom's Irish Catholic side of the family, where I would
Mm,
go to mass occasionally and then
Hmm.
go to youth group for my Lutheran church.
mm,
But in high school, I went to a public school my freshman year, and then I got transferred into a really conservative, what is it, a Missouri Synod Lutheran Church affiliated high school in Minnesota. And that was my first experience with really conservative Christianity. And I had a lot of doubts before that,
mm.
but seeing it up close, that's what kind of led me to
Mm.
question deeper. And it was actually I did not have a good time there, so much so that's what prompted my moving to a different continent altogether.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah. And that happened. So that was, you have like a spiritual awakening or unawakening
Yeah.
and make the move to Ireland. What was it? How did your atheism match up there? Because Ireland's had a major transformation in the past years, economically, socially, and religion's been a huge change there. Do you remember the religious atmosphere the first time you were there in rural Ireland?
Yeah, so I was living with a host family, and I was gonna go to the local public school. And one of the first days I got there, I was walking past the entrance hall, and there's this grotto for the Virgin Mary. And then walking down the hall, I see a portrait of Jesus and the Sacred Heart, and really throwing me off, thinking that I moved across an ocean to get away from religious education.
Right. Yes.
And learning more about what Ireland went through over in the past like few decades, really showing that it's changed a lot. So even these are kind of like the relics of the relics,
Mm,
that Ireland's secularization is what at this point in 2012 really growing a lot of distrust towards the Catholic Church,
mm,
and people are really agitated for real change, which would come in a few years with the first referendum I was involved with, which was the campaign to legalize same-sex marriage.
ooh,
Hmm. Just to sort of get the timeline. So you were in Ireland, sort of. That was in high school for a time, and then
Yeah.
you returned to the U.S. and then went back to Ireland for your undergrad.
Yes.
I see.
It's
Okay.
not normal. I totally
No, no,
understand.
no. I mean, no. I think it. I mean, no, it makes sense. Okay, so having established that, so okay, so then you got involved in sort of secular activism when you were living there. So do you want to talk about the campaign to legalize same-sex marriage?
Yeah, I got involved through my student union, UCD student union, and it was really fun to be a part of another country's social revolution.
mm,
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
to be not just a witness but a participant in a limited form. Like there was kind of a mutual understanding between me and my classmates that I wouldn't be on the doors knocking.
Right.
That
Yeah.
Right.
it doesn't look good to have Americans come over to try to influence elections.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk about that later with the abortion referendum. But
Mm,
I had grown to really love Ireland and the people, and the Ireland that I experienced was not the Ireland that my grandparents thought of. It wasn't the Ireland
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of Irish America thinks of.
mm,
It was one that was growing in diversity of ethnicity, of sexual orientation, of race. So
mm,
it was a chance to really show the world that Ireland's changing and to express my love of this Ireland. And so what I would do is I would gather the door knocking materials or the protest materials in the back and kind of be the background for that
mm.
campaign at
Mm-hmm.
in with the student union.
Mm.
And tell us more about the scale of this, in because this is we're not talking about something that's specifically, it's not atheist in nature. This is
Mhm.
social. It's about changing the laws. I guess in some ways it's about breaking the sort of the hold that Catholicism had over the Irish state. And you're doing this through your university, the University College Dublin Student Union. Tell us about the other connections, because this is a successful campaign, right?
Mhm. Yeah, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Was it?
Uh,
Is it just? It's not just door knocking, is it?
no, so a lot went into how to message the campaign, and these were a lot of people who cared about their religion, who
Mm,
were taught a very specific way of sexuality and gender. So a lot of it was messaging, whether it was online, on social media, or just having the conversations with your friends and family
mm,
about. And this was the time a lot of my friends came out to their parents as gay or trans
mm,
or lesbian, and you had this real sense that Irish people wanted to express themselves as who they were and who they are. And it was for me a really really cool experience to see that.
yeah.
But learning how to navigate those conversations, whether it's with someone who has very strong religious belief,
Mm,
but showing them that like someone they know or someone that they care about deeply just wants to live their life and be loved,
Mm-hmm.
love the people they want to love, was pretty powerful. And it kind of influenced a lot of how I viewed building coalitions or in just any political movement.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I guess it depends, like, on the sort of the religious composition of your audience, like how you want to make the argument. And well, what is the religious situation in Ireland like in terms of the demographics? If you know
So
that off the top of your head.
I don't know off the top of my head. They overwhelmingly majority would say they're Catholic. A smaller minority would say they're Church of Ireland, which is Protestant, and then small Muslim minority, and then growing non-theist
Mm-hmm.
minority,
Mm-hmm.
and a very, 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 very small number of other minority religions like Quakers and Jews.
Mm,
Primarily Catholic, and they say their religious affiliation on censuses. So next year's census will give a more accurate kind of
Right.
read of the country.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's great because like the story that you're telling gives us a different perspective on what politics means, which is something that we on Beyond Atheism we haven't dug into yet. It's very much like the starting place. I think this happens just in general. The idea of politics is just it's government and it's policy and
Hmm.
it's who's in charge. But this really it shows that deep personal connection, right? It's about just talking to your parents, laying out that position,
Yeah.
making it very, very personal. And that I can see how that's super meaningful. Definitely a similar story to what we have in the US. with regards to same-sex marriage. I remember I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts when it became legal there, and the most vocal, the loudest supporters for gay marriage were these like middle-aged women who just would just
Yeah.
stand in on the steps of City Hall and be like, "I want my daughter to have a wedding," right? Like,
Mhm.
Mm.
and they're militant about it, pretty literally. But that's something very different from abortion, which is a very religious issue, and blasphemy, which is a completely religious issue. How
Mhm.
did the organizing and the campaigns around that? How did that change? I mean, and just if you can tell us more about the blasphemy law, that's
Yeah.
kind of mind blowing that it existed.
I'll go on the abortion one first because it precedes it, or it precedes it chronologically, and I think it kind of informs of the context of when the blasphemy law was repealed. With the abortion or legalizing abortion campaign, that was to repeal the Eighth Amendment of the Irish Constitution, which stated that the life of the unborn is has equal right to life as the mother, which on itself it is very murky. It's very confusing. A lot of even legal experts, medical experts never really knew how to implement that fairly because in a lot of cases there has to be a choice. There has to be a priority that's given. And this was the law of the land for 30 years, and every time that there was a case that kind of put that into question, further legislation was put into place that kind of addressed it, but not fully. And this took decades of hard work of a lot of
Mm.
brave women who advocated for this for years, when especially working class women had to go abroad, had to go to
Mm.
the UK, to Europe to receive healthcare
Mm,
because their government in Ireland would not see them as non-criminals.
mm,
So this campaign was in its long running, but when the campaign finally got on its feet, they took a lot of inspiration from the marriage equality campaign that was a few
Mm.
years prior
mm,
about how to communicate values and what kind of society does Ireland want to be in.
yeah.
Is it the society that closes its doors to vulnerable people?
Mm,
And it moved away from a rights-based kind of discussion of right to this or the more technicalities into a more values-driven campaign. And it wasn't as happy as the one few years prior because these were still very hard choices and very traumatic experiences people went through. But people started telling their stories, just like we were talking about with same sex marriage and marriage
Mhm.
equality. People were telling them publicly, anonymously. And these were what I believe, and I think some researchers have found some data on that is what really swung the referendum in the yes side's favor was just average people, sisters, mothers, cousins, classmates talking about their experiences and their just trauma that they went through and that they don't want future generations of Irish women specifically to go through. And the interesting part on the intersection of religion and that was on that campaign, the Catholic Church really tried to take a step back and to not get involved because they
wow.
knew the kind of public opinion was no longer on their side.
Mm,
They enjoyed decades of power and it finally turned against them. And even while the anti-abortion side tried to run a secularized anti-abortion campaign, it still didn't turn out in their favor. So you had a real rejection of Catholic power in Ireland. And as I mentioned earlier, there was actually American Catholic groups that sent students over, young people over, for this
Ah,
experience to get involved in the referendum.
wow.
right.
And
On the pro-abortion, or sorry, anti-abortion side.
yeah, Yeah.
Mm.
So I ran into a few of them on the streets of Dublin, and it was a little harder to describe. It was like, "Oh, yes, I'm American, but I'm also involved in this
Yeah,
campaign,
right,
Yeah,
right.
but I live here," kind of
yeah,
Right.
thing.
Mm.
And that I think the church really saw how badly they are viewed and how little influence they had,
mm,
so much so that when the referendum to repeal the blasphemy statute in the Constitution, it kind of went under the radar. We actually,
wow,
my friend and I, one of my best friends is like my legal guru when it comes to church state relations.
mm,
Brilliant mind in Ireland. But he and I were actually having trouble engaging people to actually vote in this referendum because people just assumed that it would pass,
mm,
and
Mm.
it was not something that they considered very sexy, very just or
right,
like that impact because no one was getting punished for it any
mm,
longer. So
Mhm.
it was introduced the referendum and then it passed and that was that. It's just it seemed like a rubber stamp of Ireland's secular kind of movement over the
yeah.
last 20 years.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that is that's I mean, that's what you make it sound like that. It is this. It's a coming out almost, right? It's an
Mhm.
awareness of it. It's a marker, right? Like, okay, putting this is in the past now, and we can actually just clear the deck, and we get to decide what our values are in a secular manner. Which is and like for Nathan and I, this has been one of the themes we come back to on this podcast is that it's great that we one of the liberating things about atheism and about being a secular person is that it allows you to have these sort of discussions, make
Mhm.
these sort of decisions in life. And we see it here on this like huge social scale, a massive social transformation through what is basically secularization.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I sort of feel like the fact that these were all referendums kind of like it sort of makes them more, well, I mean, it makes them more, I guess, legitimate or absolute or something like that versus, being a Supreme Court decision or something
Mm,
like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
That's is that's actually, I happened to be in Scotland during the Scottish independence referendum in
Okay.
2014, and I think like referendums in general, this seems to. I mean, it's such a more participatory way to do democracy, obviously. But I think is there something like about in Ireland that they're more sort of they have referendums more often about things like this, or
Yeah, so the main thing why there's so many referendums in Ireland, some people, some political scientists would say there can be a little too many referendums in Ireland
mm,
is because for every constitutional amendment or treaty, there needs to be a national referendum.
mm,
So one example in a less like glamorous way was when Ireland was joining the EU, they had to have a referendum, and then actually when the first referendum failed, they actually just had to just redid it in a few years. And
oh,
mm,
right,
so same thing, but it until they get the result that they want. But
right,
putting
yeah.
these putting these very national questions because they were put in there to begin with, like the Eighth Amendment, which was repealed, that went in the 80s due to a
Mm,
national referendum saying that we needed a constitutional amendment that stated this clearly. Otherwise, it could have gone the way that the US did with a Supreme Court decision,
mm,
hmm
which a lot of people were kind of conflicted about that because on one hand, while it makes it kind of legitimate to the just general public, it's a very scary thing to have your rights on the line of on a national referendum
mm,
that
mm, hmm
um, a very majoritarian kind of rule on that might prohibit you from getting married to someone of the same sex or having healthcare.
hmm
yeah. Or and the possibility that it be undone just as easily in the future.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a jump coming back to the US then, isn't it? Where it is mostly partly because it's tougher to get things done and politicians don't want to take the blame for it. But here it seems to be more legalistic. Has that
Mhm.
been has that been a change? Have you seen a change in the style of activism?
Hmm.
Andrew, I'm not quite sure what I'm asking here.
I will say,
I think what I'm trying to get to is you have incredible success in Ireland. What is it that you were able to bring back for activism in the US?
yeah, I'll go on like vastly different political systems, societal systems, where thankfully in Ireland and in the lead up to the abortion referendum, the entire country talked about nothing else for months.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
and we were able to hash that out and like go through every single debate that one could have about abortion or legalizing it, the implications, because it was a small country and you could have those conversations just day in and day out, where America is so large and so diverse, and you're dealing with so many different media ecosystems too, that an issue is trying to fight where seems like we're talking about 50 issues a day. And
Hmm.
especially when we had a president who tweeted about 50 issues a day. But I would say something that could be learned from is actually that of having those hard discussions, and they're uncomfortable and in real life and not just online. Ironic that I spend most of my job at the Secular Coalition for America online, tweeting,
Mhm.
Facebook, but in person, those are when those really meaningful conversations happen. And I think for atheists, for secular advocates, that I think is a real important space to maintain, whether we're talking with religious allies or religious opponents.
Mhm.
Hmm. Right. So when you moved back from Ireland, so then you started your work with the Secular Coalition. Maybe you can just talk about how you actually got involved with that.
Yeah, so I came back to the US in 2019. I did a few internships. I kind of wanted to be in democratic electoral politics, and then I just got hired at this last job for a labor organization in last February, and then COVID-19 happened and my job kind of went out the window. So I was really looking for just something where I could live out my passions in politics.
Hmm.
And I had not heard about the Secular Coalition for America before. I wasn't aware of a lot of the 19 member organizations within the coalition, but being an atheist and having those experiences in Ireland and kind of complex, toxic relationship with right wing Christianity in the past, I was like, this is perfect. And I joined last July. So it's been fun.
So, and what are the 19 groups? Do you have that
So,
mastered? You don't need to name.
oh man.
You don't need to name all of them. But so this is it's a coalition. What are they organized around? Is there anything? Is there like a guiding star?
Yeah, the summary of the mission statement basically is increasing visibility and respect for non-theists, as well as fighting and protecting the secular character of our government. So we brought together 19 different, and at one point there was more back in the early 2000s. I'm sure some of your listeners will definitely be familiar with some of our member orgs: American Atheists,
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
American Humanist Association, Ex Muslims of North America, Black Nonbelievers, just a whole host of diversity within the movement, and kind of coming together as a coalition to advocate our lawmakers about our community and about the issues we care about.
I didn't realize actually that it was American Atheists and American Humanist Association and so on kind of all joined up.
Yeah,
Um, and so maybe you can talk about what you do with them specifically.
yeah, so a lot of the organizations, the bigger ones like American Atheists or Freedom from Religion Foundation,
Hmm.
they have lobbyists, but a lot of other ones, the smaller ones, don't have the resources or the capacity to employ a lobbyist. So we kind of act as their lobbying arm So we go to the meetings with Congress members or try to contact federal agencies. And now, with a more friendly White House, we've been able to lobby the Biden administration too, which has been great.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Really
Right.
positive step.
Yeah. What have you been advocating for?
Some of our big things right now are the Equality Act, which it just was is being debated in the Senate. We have the Do No Harm Act, which similar to the Equality Act about making sure that Religious Freedom Restoration Act is not RFRA is not used to discriminate against people.
Mm,
That it's not a license to discriminate.
right.
Some of our other priorities are the Scientific Integrity Act, promoting science over politics, making sure that what happened last year with Trump trying to get in the way with COVID public health information, that doesn't
Mhm.
happen.
Right.
And then of course the decades long fight against just creeping religiosity within the halls of government
Mm.
and
Hmm.
taxes.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've noticed is that there is significant intersectionality and overlap between what is definitively a secular program and what general liberal stuff. So if you look at like immigration and healthcare and stuff, it all comes up with like secular Democrats and a lot of secular organizations. The one that's singular to secular activists is the religious freedom bills. That doesn't seem to
Mhm.
get mentioned anywhere else on the left. So thank you very much for doing the work there.
Yeah.
um, is there so lobbying is wild. I hadn't even considered that that's something that secularists could do. My mind, I guess, because of the way I became interested in politics, starts with that activism. It does the
Mm.
coalition work with grassroots activists as well?
Yeah, so in the past, Secular Coalition for America has we're kind of at a more smaller staff than we have been in the past. We used to have volunteer-run state chapters, but now a lot of our member orgs have state chapters, like American Humanist Association. So we like to engage those members because, by de facto, they're also members of our coalition.
Mm,
And in normal years, we would have a big day called Lobby Day where we would bring in volunteers from all over the country and we would go visit lawmakers in their offices. But
mm,
Mm.
this year, we're probably going to do it virtually.
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
But we try to engage that grassroots kind of way through action alerts, online petitions, just and really keeping some of our issues alive. And because what I've noticed, and kind of on the point you made, a lot of liberals and Democrats, especially in electoral office, are friendly to a lot of our priorities, but we are still fighting for just kind of that equal recognition. And sometimes it helps to just have our activists who majority vote Democrat or who vote for liberal causes to tell their liberal representative to get on board with this thing.
yeah,
It can really, because a lot of atheists and non-theists, we have very strong opinions on things,
mm,
and it's, the general public, I don't think hears that often. So we really try to engage our grassroots when those things come up.
yeah.
One thing I was going to ask is, with regard to the lobbying. So I guess you're talking with members of Congress, I suppose, and their staff. But I wonder, like, what is the reception like for sort of secular organizations? I mean, is it a warm reception, do you think, or?
It's definitely gotten warmer,
Hmm.
Mhm,
Hmm.
but especially since 2018, there's the Congressional Free Thought Caucus,
mm,
started by Representative Jamie Raskin and Jared Huffman. They have been really beneficial to, as just kind of our foot in the door in Congress, but also giving a kind of legitimacy to our constituents
mm,
and our supporters to be like that state church separation really matters, and it shouldn't just matter to non-theists but matters to
Hmm. Hmm.
everyone. and really engaging non-theists in that community or humanists. And you're seeing that by every month, I'm seeing greater warmth towards our community
Mm.
when the Biden White House announced that they were going to revamp their Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood
Yeah.
Partnerships office. There was a lot of debate within the secular community about even the validity of that office and whether it should exist or not. But in their fact sheet, they gave 2 paragraphs talking about how important state church separation was, and mentioned secular humanists, which I think is probably the most vocal a presidential White House has ever been towards secular people,
Yeah.
and not just like the normal and no religion or
Right.
none at
Right.
all, like
Right.
actual
Yep.
Yeah.
specific about what we believe and
Yeah.
how we believe, and so that, and I do see that just continuing that trend of inclusivity and warmth towards the secular community.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and just you mentioning that reminds me that I think it was in 91, George W. Bush came out and said, like, atheists shouldn't even be considered American. Like, that's,
Ugh.
which is as extreme as you can get. And to have now an office in the White House saying, yeah, this is part of America. We need to include these people in this office, in this outreach. That's, that's a huge change.
Mhm.
And the other thing we hadn't made the connection between is now we're starting to see this larger network between getting non-theistic people in office, people who are specifically interested in that, and that being a connection to the rest of the country, their representatives,
Yeah.
through that sort of connection through these groups. So
And
I can see how the coalition starts to build this network of like-minded people. This is
mhm.
really great. So, how do people, you mentioned the action alerts, the virtual lobby days, people who are interested in either just hearing from you guys or people who want to get involved and possibly get involved in the actions or work for you guys? What's the best resource, best way to get connected?
Yeah, so you can go to our website at secular.org, or and on Twitter you can go to at secular.org, and that I will spell out secular DOTORG,
Hmm.
um all together, but
We'll
and
have links
then
below.
okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And then there's a email sign up form which you can get, so stay up to date about our lobbying efforts. We do a bi-monthly called Heretic on the Hill, where our lobbyist writes about what's going on the advocacy side of things, and then follow the Twitter account, which is basically me.
That's the best part, right?
Yeah. Twitter is a great place to be when you're an atheist.
I wouldn't know. It's worked out well for Nathan, I hear.
I mean, yeah, you gotta get on Twitter. It's all
Well,
happening. It's all
I
happening there.
mean,
Yeah.
that's where I found you guys, and that's how I found Nathan. So must be doing something right.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah. Maybe you could say specifically, like, if someone wants to get involved in, like, in activism in general. I mean,
Mm.
do you have thoughts about that? Like, just in general, like how to be an activist, basically.
Wow.
That's a
Yeah.
I
philosophical question.
like, and not to like diminish like how hard a lot of people work, but I do think kind of returning back to that idea of conversations with people in your network and in community, whether that's talking about the intersection of white Christian nationalism and anti-Asian racism,
Mm.
or whether that's just talking about your own experience as a non-theist and about what certain issues matter, of like how do like the conversations that are going on in Washington, they're generally, like, we like to think that they're not going on around the country, that around the country people have saner conversations to have, but what they're saying is very reflective of a lot of the issues people live with. So
Mm.
I as terms of like how to be an activist is just how to be an advocate for yourself and others.
Hmm.
I would say is just learn how to use your voice and practice using your voice in whatever way that is, whether it's on Twitter or it's, you're standing on the side of the road with petitions, or you're door knocking for a campaign, or you're just having a chat with your parents.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But speaking of Twitter and Lobby
Hmm.
Day,
Yeah.
when you've been, you can tell us just who sucks. Who have you met there that just sucks?
I won't name Ted Cruz.
Too easy.
So
Well,
the first day on the job here at Secular Coalition, he said something on Twitter, and then it was like right away I like dunked on him, and it was just like it felt so good to use that platform.
all right. Well, we've got a link to that tweet as well
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that sounds
my first
heroic.
ever my first ever tweet for Secular Coalition for America.
Oh, nice.
Really? Oh man,
Yeah,
starting at the top. You got to come out
exactly.
strong. That's how they respect you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, what's next? Anything coming up in the immediate future? Or anything you want to plug? Anything you want
We're doing a March Madness. We're gonna be asking our followers about like which bill that's currently in a state legislature is the worst. So keep an eye on that. We'll be sending out recent or upcoming action alerts about what you can do to get involved and what issues we're focused on here in Washington D.C. on your behalf as a non-theist American.
Mm,
to? Awesome.
awesome. Cool.
Sounds great. All right, Andrew. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for having me. It's
Yeah.
been really fun.
Andrew's great. Secular
Hmm.
Coalition. They sound great. So here's a surprising thing I hadn't thought about: lobbying. They lobby. That's super.
Hmm.
And I love that that it's they connect to grassroots levels.
Yeah. Hmm.
Love
Yeah,
that.
definitely. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, and I definitely learned a lot about the organization.
And like to hear about successful secular campaigns, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
That's
definitely, and especially in Ireland, I guess, which was for such a long time such a strongly Catholic country. It sort of shows you how quick secularization can happen, and
totally, yeah,
yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, the question about like getting a law passed like through a referendum makes it maybe a bit more meaningful, perhaps, than it might otherwise be. Just and it involves the whole population, and then maybe it
yeah,
makes the question a bit more settled.
yeah. It certainly makes it more democratic. I mean,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
questions about political legitimacy are a little
mm,
weird, but your
mm,
point being that like makes it more democratic, it gets everyone involved, and to throw it back to something we had talked about a couple weeks ago, this idea like what atheism does for us, like it
mm-hmm,
allows us the freedom to decide for ourselves who we want to be, and that was
mm-hmm,
exactly how Andrew described the discussion that Irish people were having as
mm-hmm,
they're
mm-hmm,
throwing off these religious laws, deciding to be the people that they want to be, and how they change it. It's empowering.
mm-hmm,
It's awesome.
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
All right. And a great
Yeah,
reminder that we can do it here. It starts with who you are, being yourself, being true to your
mm-hmm,
atheist self,
mm-hmm,
admitting it, talking to other people.
mm-hmm.
It all sounds so simple when Andrew describes it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
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 just start talking to people, knock on
yeah,
some doors. There you go. And
yeah,
now, yeah, and now this religious domination is out of your life.
yeah. But I
Oh,
think it's an interesting point though, just about doing politics, and it can just be as simple as talking with someone. I mean, when I was in Scotland, like for the referendum there, like the independence one, it did feel like, especially because everyone knew it was going to be really close. Like every
yeah.
conversation really did matter. Like every
Mm,
vote really did matter in that case.
right. Yeah.
Whereas obviously in many elections, or some elections anyway, like that's not the case, where like the outcome is sometimes predetermined, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one, it's especially in the American context right now. A lot of political science research points out that most of the bills that are passed,
Hmm.
meaning like through legislation, people have zero say in it. They're just not
Yes, right,
responsive to
right.
you. And it definitely feels disempowering if you are that individual, right?
Yeah.
And we are individuals
Hmm.
in some ways, right? That if we write a letter or make a phone call, it's going to be ignored. But
Hmm.
what the Secular Coalition does is it unites us and turns into
Hmm.
something that's not being ignored. In fact, it's something that's
Hmm.
being welcomed in some ways
Hmm.
into the halls of power. And
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
that's great to know about. It's a great resource, and it's something that everybody, each and every one of us as secular people, can become involved in.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Yeah, fantastic stuff. Great to know. All right,
Hmm.
Nathan, you got
Yes.
anything coming up? Anything important you gotta plug?
No, nothing to plug. Just my Twitter account, such as it is,
Mm-hmm.
which is at Nath G Alexander. And you
I
have
am not
a
on Twitter still,
no,
surprisingly.
no, but you're writing. People should
Uh,
should check it out because
yeah.
you're writing sort of post episode reflections on your Medium page, which
You
is
make it
pretty
sound so
cool.
spiritual when you put it that way.
Yes,
I'll
exactly.
be there with my crystals, writing my reflections on Medium. Yeah, I think that'll be linked below.
Yes, yes.
I guess I'm on Facebook, but don't bother contacting me
Oh,
there. Send just send all your angry tweets to Nathan, and
yes,
yep,
yeah.
he'll let me know.
Yeah, yeah, right. I'll pass along the messages.
Yep,
Right. So, and people should subscribe or follow the podcast
absolutely.
if it's possible to do so.
Yep. Big thanks to Red
Yes.
Japan for the music. Big thanks to
Yes.
Andrew for
Yeah,
talking to
definitely.
us. Big thanks
Yep.
to Secular Coalition for putting in the work, and big thanks to everybody for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yes. See everyone next time.